Hello, Culture Matters podcast. Before I introduce you to this episode, here's a quote just for this podcast. The very fact that a general problem has gripped and assimilated the whole of a person is a guarantee that the speaker has really experienced it and perhaps gained something from his sufferings. He will then reflect the problem in his personal life and thereby share with us a truth and thereby show us a truth. Damn it. Carl Gustav Jung. Trying to memorize that quote. I can show you how not to memorize something. I haven't put in the work. I'll tell you about. Before I'm going to elucidate on that thought, but I should probably stick with the show here for a second. I'll come back to that. We're at the recap of the 12 more rules for uh, 12 more rules Beyond Order, the Beyond Order series. We've gone together through all 12 rules of Beyond Order written by Dr. Jordan B. Peterson. Almost, it was so hard to hit record because it's like I prepared for this by rewriting the rules down from memory, and it's like if there's one thing that you've garnered from this series is that I've been able to remember the rules. Maybe I don't know what they actually mean, and I haven't done a good enough job teaching them, but I at least remember them. Maybe a word here or there is missing, which actually, when it comes to Dr. Peterson, every word is chosen carefully. So that's actually not a good sign if I messed a word up here or there, which I have. Um, Back to the memorizing of the quote, something that have not yet done for this quote because I would like to remember this quote is I'll break down a quote or a speech down into stanzas. Like, so if there's three sentences, I'll break each sentence, I'll separate each sentence one, two, three, and then say each sentence out loud and put a dash. I learned this from a mentor many years ago. And it's been a great tool to internalize just about anything. And so if that helps, but I have not memorized or internalized this quote yet about and thereby show us a truth. Where to begin? Well, I feel like I've talked about rule one so much in this series, and I think which is do not carelessly denigrate social institutions or creative achievements. And I think part of the reason I haven't done this intentionally, but it could be because such a big part of this book and the 12 rules for life is about taking uh stopping us in our tracks if we're acting out a victim narrative. What does that even mean, right? Victim narrative, a story or combination of stories that disempower us from being what we could be, from being as successful as we could be, from opening up a possibility for our potential to be set forth from education, career, family, friendship, hobby or personal interest, community, culture. Culture matters, people. And rule one has been talked about a lot. I went through each rule. I wrote them all down. I thought, how can I or would there be a word that came to mind that summarized each one? And I have it right here in the note form on the Remarkable. And the first, of course, the word that summarizes rule one, if you haven't, go listen to rule one on the Culture Matters podcast, or if you this is the first time you're joining us. I've painstakingly gone through reading the book, writing thought notes, reflecting on those notes, and speaking and I've spoken on the notes. I have now gone and re-listened to this series yet, listen to hear what is unsaid, because I'll do that before, that would be a great exercise, right? Read to think, write to develop, listen to hear what is unsaid, speak to let go. I've, I have, yeah, I guess when I've been listening to the audiobooks, I've been listening for what's unsaid, trying to think through how to formulate my thoughts. Because I've listened to the audio of the book Beyond Order. I've read the book multiple times, written notes. Now I'm speaking, I'm teaching, I'm attempting to teach the rules. That's what I've been attempting to do, synthesize them with um, through my lens as a culture advisor and consultant of company culture, a small business advisor. And I haven't re-listened to the series yet, but if you're just joining us now, there's an episode in each rule. If you're waiting for me to get to it because you've listened to all of them, I'm almost there. So this idea is, going through this whole process, I'm not the same person. I see each rule differently. I think with a deeper lens, a broader understanding, having gone through the whole thing. And I have a word or a saying on each of the rules, like almost like, all right, bottle it down to what is this rule actually, what word would represent this rule? So I think victim represents rule one. Moving from a victim stance or a reactive stance to a proactive, more capable, more responsible, more fulfilled, and have a greater potential for meaning and purpose as an individual is where we're moving forward through these rules. So if I'm carelessly denigrating social institutions and creative achievements, I'm cutting off a possibility for, right? That makes sense. If I'm tearing down the company, I'm not moving up in the company from a career standpoint. I've got to go get another company. And so from a cultural sense, those that are going against the culture, against the civil, yeah, against, I was about to say civilization. In some sense, that could be argued. It's too much for me to think about right now. Let's say country. If I'm going against the country, I'm not necessarily focused on my career unless that is my career. I guess that's one of the interesting things about a country that gives its people the ability to speak their mind is one could make a career out of going against. And maybe both are necessary, but moving from reactive to proactive, moving from reactive to proactive. It's like if I'm in a business and I don't like the way that the business is being set up, um, and I'm speaking out against the business, I'm going against the business or the organization. I'm not investing my energy, my time and my space, my intellectual property in serving the customers. I'm investing my time and my space, my intellectual property in critiquing the organization. And Dr. Peterson is making the argument that the way that to make sure that we're auditing the organization the most effective way is to learn, firstly, who our customers are, how to serve them, and put ourselves in the best position possible to actually add value to the customers. If it's like a business analogy, you have customers, you have the enterprise, you have the organization that forms over time, its organizational chart, the job descriptions, right? Their descriptions of personal responsibility of the different constituents necessary uh, to fulfill products and services for customers. That manifests over time as more and more customers are served and more customers desire to be served. by the organization, more and more people are going to work for and with the organization, have to believe in the organization's mission, vision, core values, leadership. When the employees do not believe in the mission, the vision, don't know or believe in the story, don't and are not inspired in spirit, right? The those above them in the hierarchy in the org chart are in spirit, modeling the values that represent and align with the story that that's the historical foundation of the business. The employees are less likely to be long-term oriented, sacrifice their short-term impulses not to work, not to be productive, or to work by sacrificing and to be productive. They won't work, they'll be unproductive, and they'll spend the majority of their time talking against the company versus talking with and for with one another for the customer. And that starts to destabilize the company. It destabilizes the productivity, it undermines the purpose, it builds it's the resentment that lives in all human hearts gets stirred up. You know, it's stirred, the ingredients are thrown in there, and ultimately the customer loses. When this happens with a country, who is the customer? The customer is everyone. The customer is like the future generations of the employees, the population. If the employees of the population of the employees, the governing body, the government, and its various in this, in the United States of America, there's levers of power to attempt to counterbalance the natural flux of popular thought that has an influence on the population's buy-in or not buy-in of the overall story, and the core values necessary for the employees to be as productive, the citizens, productive, purpose-driven, focused, engaged, self-sacrifice. The people have to be busybodies, busy working for themselves, for their families, for the roads to be paved, for the resentment to be low enough, for the psychos to be either not activated or imprisoned, for ultimately homeostasis to be occur with the society, which is not that there's no conflict, it's just the conflict is bearable. It's not that there's none, it's that it's bearable. And bearable conflict means that for example, on the political context, people can speak their mind and not attack and attempt to destroy and defame one another. Um, in the religious context, they accept one another's subjective agreements to the greater unknown. Uh, it's like, what do they say? Don't talk about religion and politics at the dinner table. Why? Because it takes superhuman values, supernatural, a lot of irony there. It would take like a martyr to be able to have the conversation without it digressing into violence or what have you. But when the culture is destabilized, people stop believing in the story, and the all the leaders have left the room. Then all we can do is talk about religion and politics at the dinner table, and it's not we're not going to be able to bear one another. Those that have differing views and opinions that we may never even learn because we never have those deep of conversations over the dinner table. It's like when a company is overly focused on its employees, overly focused on itself, its shareholders, overly focused on inside. versus has his attention on the customer, its vision on the future customer, and is listening to itself, meaning it's listening to the customer's feedback to it, it's listening to its employees' feedback to it. It can innovate, it can reorient itself in response to what's completely unknown to it, which is the future, how competition will impact its value in the marketplace, how the marketplace or like the general market, the 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 development of the society, the development of technology, and how that relates to society may changes the business's dynamics before it even catches up. It's going to catch up relative to the communication, relative to its attention, relative to its intention, and that comes from the focus on the customers, from the focus on its purpose. And like Drucker said, the purpose of a business is to serve and is to create and keep a customer. How does it do that? It's it's focused on what works, it's focused on what doesn't work, and it's reflecting upon the past to project into the future. And to do that, it's got to be customer focused, self-sacrificing, longer term oriented, in spite of the short term conflicts that come with life. But when it becomes too short term oriented and not long term enough oriented, it starts to eat and feed itself. Example, management is short term oriented in their behavior. What's coming out of their mouth is long term oriented, like we're going here and we're doing this, but how they're acting is they're taking all the money out of the business, they're engrossing themselves in profits. The employees are going to look and say, why would I be long term oriented when you're being short term oriented? The employee's career is going to be based on the growth and success of the business, but being short term oriented or increases risk of the business. Being a hypocrite increases risk of the business. The long term orientation of the employee is going to be, do I have a career here? What's my future look like here? Do I respect and believe in my employers? Do I want to be like them? Are there things that I can see myself learning from them? Because that's going to create positive emotions, as we learned from Dr. Peterson in the personality transformation courses, that positive emotion is tied to a goal, and negative emotion is an unnecessary feedback loop based on the uncertainty that comes with life and the unexpected the inevitable unexpected stimulus that's going to occur when things don't go our way. Just being in the world, there's right what we know and what we project, and when what we are projecting, like based on our vision, our plan, doesn't go the way we hope it to be, we will be thrown into despair, thrown into anxiety. That's where personal responsibility comes in. If we play the victim or play out a story of victimhood, then the anxiety stays and it grows, and we're more easily susceptible to resentment. We're more likely to break down our culture, to break down our relationships, to break ourselves away from others, to compete with our teammates versus cooperate with our teammates and compete in the greater culture. And this whole freaking journey of these rules is meant to help us be more, take on, yeah, wait, hold on, be more, to aim up, have a vision, to make a plan, to take on voluntary suffering, be more personally responsible, act be open to stories of heroes that are admirable, that demonstrate constructive behaviors, uh, to take on rituals that can increase the likelihood of us succeeding in our lives from an education, career, family, friendship, personal interest, community, cultural way, to understand ourselves as individuals, to understand ourselves as a self that relates to others. Wow, I didn't even talk about rule two yet. I'm still on rule one. Um, I hope the business analogy has been helpful. And generally, like the reason I'm even capable of speaking on this topic is because working with businesses with whether they have 20 employees or 500 or um, those that are in positions of authority and it have implicit influence, and they're what those in positions of authority say and do, what they say and what they do, and how congruent what they say and what they do is impacts everything. It reveals the culture, and the culture has a relationship with the balance sheet, the profit and loss, the the valuation, everything. Because a business is really just people. A business is people that are bringing a product or service to the market in a way that it can be accepted and digested and utilized ultimately for the benefit of customers and shareholders. We're all customers and shareholders, whether we realize it or not, because we're a part of the system. And this is a leadership podcast. Culture matters. Culture, hero, story, language, symbolism, rituals. It goes deeper, deeper, deeper as you learn and study more and more and more. It's not just about your company. It's not just about your life. It's about your country and the world. And like that's hopefully over the next 10 years, whatever, we can explore that together. But culture matters at every level, individual, family, community, or yeah, career, community, country, civilization, and so on. Um, so rule one, victim. That's what stands out. Regardless of circumstances, what can you do to be less reactive and more proactive in the world? There's a lot of things we can do. Have we been educated to our innate intelligence or ambition? Have we, uh, what do our friendships look like? What are our family dynamics look like? What about our partnerships? How involved are we in communities? Do we have personal interests? What's our relationship with metaphysically with some type of, with a belief? Do we believe in God? Or what idols do we worship? That's where the conversation starts. Imagine who you could be and single-minded. Imagine who you could be and aim single-mindedly at that. The word I wrote down was aim up. It was aim up. It was Peterson's telling us to aim up and making an argument for values. And there are and the hierarchy of values. The hierarchy of values. We value different things. The we as in like ourself is not just it's more complex than we might give it credit. We have many forces implicit in our being that are fighting for dominance: food, water, sex, shelter, and I guess you could call it like everything that I listed before, that checklist about us, our friendships, our friendships, our relationship, our community. All let's say we go to order all of these things, they're going to be out of order at some degree due to the randomness and as a consequence of just life. And we're constantly making decisions of value, whether we realize it or not. And Dr. Peterson is saying, aim up. So don't let life kick you down and keep you down. Look up, aim up, have a vision, write down a plan, and go for it. And if you don't have a if you haven't said yes to something bigger than yourself, how can you say no to the distractions? How can you say no? I remember I remember being at an entrepreneurial party in 2016. It was like November 2016. I say entrepreneurial party because it was a party thrown by entrepreneurs, and a lot of entrepreneurs were there, and was trying to I was saying that culture mattered. I was taking on the risk of it not working with credit and debt, or that's the same thing. Credit, well, I guess that's not the same thing. But I was taking the risk. I was saying culture mattered, but I was not as dedicated. I was not as courageous as I needed to be based on the results. And I remember realizing that I wasn't all in and that I had to get all in, or what the hell was I doing? I remember saying, I'm not going to party and I'm not going to drink and uh, I'm going to go all in. I'm not going to continue being this way. It's not working. I'm failing. And for me, I had to say that awareness that I was being hypocritical was a big gut punch. I had to give up. But how could I say no to the things that I desired in the short term based on the entitlement that comes with being able to do them? I had to give up things to be more responsible. They were distracting me. They were speaking to parts of me that are, in an order of value, less valuable for myself in the long term and others in the short and the long term. I was being that behavior in another context could be absolutely okay. Going out and partying and enjoying one's life. But that's not what I was saying that I wanted. I was saying that I wanted a successful business in culture matters. Teaching, advising, consulting on company culture. That's what I was saying. I was passionate. I was telling myself. I was telling others. I was attempting to get business. And it was not succeeding because I wasn't, because of other behaviors that I was doing and rituals that I was doing and people that I was associating with that enabled that behavior. So I said, I'm not going to do it. And I'm going to be more focused. And for me, that worked. Maybe if you're listening to this, you are, I'm say maybe you're much smarter and um, just better, and you could do maybe in that same scenario, you would have been more successful sooner with whatever well, I guess that's not the theory that Jordan's presenting here. We all have a vice. For me, it was like partying was not going to help me market, sell, fulfill, and be successful with for you it could be something else that is like going to limit your potential. And so imagine and this ties to rule 3, because imagine who you could be named single-mindedly at that. That's like leading to yes. It's like, what do I want? And I think that being clear what we want helps us say no. It's always helped me say no. Because how do I say no to anything if I don't know what I want? I'm kind of just going with impulse. I'm just going based on uh, self-centered. The self-centered nature that is necessary to pursue a goal tirelessly and obsessively and succeed, it's the energy necessary to hit the target. But if there's no target, then it's just going in every direction. It's not going straight. So we're not going to get that compounding exponential return without the aim and the ability to say no and the what focus, I guess. So I wrote aim up and values. What do we value? You might not value culture. You might not value business or being a productive. You might not value work, or you might not value business. You might not value culture. Well, then you're likely not listening to this unless you're trying to figure out how to debunk it or something, which great, that'll make it better. I don't know. So you probably do value those things, though, if you're watching this in the majority. And that's what rule two is like. Imagine you could be, so you could say yes to something, then you're able to say no to something. And that's a call to that brings up rule three: do not hide unwanted things in the fog. And the reason that that's important, Dr. Peterson is making the argument that um, our the clarity of our vision has a relationship to do with our past and the stories that we're living out that we are aware and or not aware of. And Kierkegaard is what I wrote down. No, that was somewhere else. Never mind. Was it Kierkegaard? Yeah, it was Kierkegaard. Life can only be understood backwards, but must be lived forwards. It's not the avoidance of the past and rewriting it. It's the acknowledgement, the understanding and unpacking, and the synthesization of the past into the future that creates the most uh, self-aware and benevolent power. I guess that's, love versus power. How can one love if one is closed off from love, and it would be hard to love if one is stuck in guilt and shame and despair, and that's why it's important to that's the value of the past authoring program. Past authoring, present authoring, future authoring. They're in that order because it's our vision is going to have, and the clarity of our vision will have a relationship with the opacity of the past. And the more suffering that you've been through, the more likely there are things that have to be talked about and discussed and synthesized that are necessary energy forces to put you into the future, not be the victim, but also not be the bully. It's so rule, yeah. Here's it. Here it is. Because it, okay, so you're not carelessly denigrating social institutions and creative achievements. You're actually starting to realize you can do something, and you've already read 12 Rules for Life. So you're standing up with your shoulders back. You're treating yourself like someone you're responsible for helping. You're making friends with people that want the best for you. And so you're going to learn the system before you critique the system. You're going to be totally involved and go all in, put your house in perfect order before you criticize the world, and be as responsible and capable as possible. So your words matter. Okay. Yeah. Okay. You're imagining who you can be and you're aiming single-minded at that. So you have a vision, you have a plan, and you're capable of navigating the obstacles because there's obstacles, there's pathways, obstacles, and I'm missing something. Because in maps of meaning, there's what is and there's what it says what should be is a value statement, but it's what could be is the potential. And the should is like the middle. It's like there should dictates up or down. Up is like constructive conflict, down is deconstructive conflict. And he's making an argument neuropsychologically how, the down is like anxiety and despair, and the up is hope. It's which has to do with the goal, hope. It's that positive feedback because there's short-term dopaminergic uh, incentive, the incentive reward system in our brain leads us to need a new goal. We need a goal. We need a goal. We need a goal. We need a goal. We also need to be able to reorient ourselves when the things that we are hoping for don't happen the way we expected them to. That's the challenge to our self. That's the challenge to our ability to respond to conflict. And that has a relationship with that checklist: education, family, relationship, religion, community, culture, essentially. Um, so rule 4, notice that opportunity lurks where responsibility has been abdicated. I'm not going to notice where responsibility has been abdicated and step into that seat of leadership if I'm acting out a victim narrative. I'm actually tearing it down. I've abdicated my personal responsibility as an individual, and now I'm Seth versus Osiris. I'm Seth. I'm not Osiris, or like the benevolent version of Osiris. I'm Seth. And that's not, if you don't know the story, go listen to rule 4 after this on the Culture Crunch podcast. I'll just tell the story. But Osiris built a civilization, and then he stopped paying attention. So if he was at the top of the hierarchy, and the leader in a position of authority influence, the CEO. And I've seen this. This destroys companies when the CEO stops paying attention. Everything breaks down. Everybody, everything when when the CEO stops paying attention, when there isn't a goal, there is not going to be rituals around how we're going to accomplish that goal. There's not going to be open, honest, reflective communication of a team around that goal. And so things just start breaking down, and malevolence rises to the top. In that story, Osiris gets killed by his evil brother Seth, and his son that's born from his dead corpse has to come and fight Seth, and he has vision and save his father from the underworld. So he has to like integrate his shadow by going to the underworld and become one and revitalize the culture. And it speaks to this piece of notice that you're going to notice. Yeah, what you value is revealed in what you notice. That's showing where your attention is. Notice that opportunity lurks. It lurks because it's where conflict is, like where the problems are. So a CEO, for example, that is not focused on all the problems and can't live within fixing the problems and projecting the future. That's not gonna it's not functioning at the highest level, because it's like a chief problem fixer. And the spirit of where we're going and why we're going there is necessary as much as what's going on, what can be better, what isn't working. So if you hide unwanted things in the fog, your aim won't be as clear. It will be, it will be, you'll be less likely to notice that opportunity lurks where responsibility has been abdicated, because you've abdicated responsibility. From a cultural sense, like the modern day culture wars, Dr. Peterson is trying to argue that there's plenty of youth that have not gone all in on their education, all in on their lives, that are kind of just going against the system that they might not, they don't fully understand, haven't done enough of the work, and they're kind of like cogs in the machine of these like higher order powers that are at war in our culture today to try to change the entire structure of how we're governed as human beings. It's the war of sovereignty, the individual versus the group, the the opportunity for the sovereignty of the individual and individual agency that we can easily take for granted being in. So, for example, the United States, America, or the West, and we don't even know what we have and how great it is to be able to have these opportunities we're overly focused on the problems that are real, that do need to get fixed, but the order in which we fix them, like fix ourselves and then them, is the right way to do it. But we're not, if we're not focused on ourselves first, and we're only focused on the real problems that do exist, we're not going to be capable enough, be able to see and understand and synthesize and process enough to fix the problems. And we're kind of just become easily manipulated cogs in the machine of the actual real enemies that are in the world, that have a different operating system, that would like to take our harvest our energy in a different way. This would be, I'm like overly uh, wordy on this. You know, it's the East versus the West, or the totalitarian ethic or governing system versus the um, Western governing system. They're two different business models. It's like two different business models. Which employer do you want to work for? That's the question that we have to ask. Do we want to work for the employer where we don't get to say what we think and speak our mind, even though the company's not perfect and has a lot of problems? That would be the argument for the totalitarian operating system. Or do we want to work for the employer that we do get to speak our minds? We do have an opportunity to step into that, um, we do have the opportunity to step into our potential. We can speak, we can say what we think, by and large. We can do what we want, by and large. We can even speak against management, by and large. We could do that in the West. But in the totalitarian ethic, we are unable to do that. If we cannot speak against management, we cannot speak against those philosophies. We are going to give up our agency, and we are going to be told what to think, and we are going to be influenced. Our speech will be limited, our thoughts will be limited, and we will lose our agency. And that's the risk. Which employer do you want to work for? And for the employer that, I'm using this analogy of employer, but we're talking about like countries and uh, governing bodies. So some countries, every country has a different way, an operating system, at varying degrees. And then there are like, I guess, I don't know. I don't, hmm. Every country has different operating system, but then there's differing philosophies at a varying degree, from like completely opposite to somewhere to completely similar, somewhere in between. And there's a culture, there's always a war of philosophical ways of being in the world that we either do or don't understand, or somewhere in between that. And ultimately, he's making the argument that if we if we learn our system the best possible way, we'll be able to make the world a better place. But it starts with us getting our life the most successful as possible, you know. And then we'll ultimately make sure that order is in the world at the degree that it would need to be for good, and for to combat evil, or to, for us to avoid, mass destruction of human life and so on. Like, it becomes extreme very quickly. Like, what does that have to do with all these rules? Well, I mean, that's the general theme here for maps of meaning, and these rules are, it's like, why do good people do evil things? Because they don't know enough about themselves and the world. And when things get rough, good people, or perceivably good people, end up doing evil things. So to notice that opportunity lurks where responsibility has been abdicated, it's good to not hide unwanted things in the fog. It's because one of the opportunities being in the West is that there's always room to move up, because there's always people that were up, that, like, they were in, think about it, they were in, they're entitled by their success, that people fail. So people go up, they go up the corporate ladder, and then they get there, and they're like, there should be more to this. And then they start doing dumb things. And it might be you've done dumb things, I've done dumb things. every individual in the free society, or, let's say the society of agency, I don't, we're permitted to do dumb things because we could say and think what we want and do what we want, like enough to ruin our careers, to ruin our marriages, to ruin. We're allowed to do that. There's going to be consequences. There's laws, obviously, to make sure there's guardrails, but people create success. And then when they don't have that, and that's part of the argument here, like the spiritual and the meaning piece and the responsibility to maintain authority and influence, people end up falling into despair. And then that's an opportunity for you to take their job, to take their company, to take in the marketplace, to compete with them. That's one of the things that's an opportunity in a capitalist system, for example, in a trade, as a consequence of trade, the ability to trade and exchange values, goods and services through our core values, there's always opportunity to move up. And actually, in the How to Plan Your Life, Peterson talks about the facts around when there isn't meritocracy based on competence, which is conscientiousness and intelligence, which influences those most, then societies become dynasty based or like nepotism. It's not like everything's just equal, the quality of outcome. Now the other philosophy is, hey, everything has to be equality of outcome. That's more on the Marxist, the communal philosophy of governing, right? Running the organization, creating. There's not upward mobility for the people. It's like, forget about upward mobility. There are, I guess, in the sense, for the loyalists that are not going to speak their mind and tell the truth. I mean, that's one of the arguments of it, because the truth changes and you need people to constantly be saying what they think to figure out what the truth is. It kind of gets top heavy and bottled up in that bureaucratic governing body. Uh, uh, but the argument is, you don't need to move up. You don't need a career. You don't need to build anything. We're just going to figure out how to give you all the resources necessary for you to live your life. And Peterson's, and a lot of people have made the argument that that's not really what makes life meaningful. It's taking on voluntary suffering, and actually it's the pursuit of happiness that makes life meaningful, because it's not actually about happiness. Because when people say they want happiness, they really want to mitigate suffering. Well, if you take away all the responsibilities and you just give everybody all the food and water and things they want, they actually suffer because they become bored and lose all meaning, because you need suffering. But of course, the other argument with those systems are they don't even work. So not only do they not give people meaning, they just make more and more suffering and force people to lie to themselves and lie to others. And they also don't even work. They, but even if they worked, they still wouldn't work. And so like that's an argument in this whole thing. Maybe you don't believe that. You, you know, are you're getting meaning and purpose from destroying. So I guess that's the thing. Some people get meaning and purpose from destroying the culture because they want to rebuild the culture, make it better. And then others get meaning and purpose from protecting the culture because they want to make it better too, but they want to do it in a different way. And that's in essence how maybe that's in essence why in a society that lets people say and think generally what they want and believe what they believe, there's a right and there's a left politically that have to communicate with one another. Uh, one is geared more leaning towards keeping what it has, and one is leaning more towards creating what could be. And there's an interplay there. I gotta digress because this is becoming. I'm just losing. I'm losing myself in this conversation. But that's the fun part for me. So you can bear with me. But so where have we come from so far in this recap of what I've learned from the 12 rules? Um, yeah, don't be a victim. You got to aim up to see what you value and what your values are. Your core values are really revealed in how you behave. The how is the should. The should is the subjective value, but also even if subjective values that lead to actions and interactions have consequences. So it's like, what consequences do you want for your life? If you do, it doesn't take a giant leap of intellect to think if you do drugs every day for 5 years, it's likely going to degenerate yourself, ability to have a job, ability to have be a parent, ability to be a spouse, ability to function within a society. And so if that's what you want to do, you have the ability to do it, but you may not want to do that as much as you think you want to do it. And if you're doing it, you're likely not thinking. You're caught in this downward aim. And I think part of the argument in this book is, the especially rule six and rule six and rule five, which is where we're going. Rule five, do not do what you hate, and rule six, abandon ideology. You can have a downward aim just being self-righteously a part of a movement that's destroying the culture well intentionally, like with good intention. Because the company might not be as bad as you think it is. You may just not know enough about the company and haven't been afforded the resources and the responsibility to really test and like burden your suffering in the most productive, meaningful way. And when you do take over the company and it is yours, you won't know enough about yourself or the world or the company to actually run it and manage it properly. And that seems to be like the entire argument for the totalitarian regimes that have manifested, that naturally manifested the consequence of the inept managements that run and have run countries throughout human civilization. There's a lot of responsibility that comes with management from an individual and group like management perspective, and it has a relationship with telling the truth and burdening truth. Yeah, basic things: eh, listening, asking questions, telling the truth, being up to speed with like how what the world, the state of the world, that's what the information and knowledge. And if a country doesn't innovate, it's going to go out of business. If a company doesn't innovate, it's going to go out of business. If an individual doesn't continue to learn and unlearn, they're going to go out of business. If a marriage doesn't learn, that's rule 10. Learn and unlearn, it's going to go out of business. Rule five is do not do what you hate. Don't just go with the crowd or you're going to end up in an ideology. Tell the truth. And even if, what's the word I use for it? Tell the truth. Yeah. Even if it doesn't benefit you in the short term. That's the Job story that Peterson talks about all the time. He did everything he possibly could. He was never going to get it right. God made a deal with Satan, how he was a good man. Do whatever the hell you want to him. You'll see. He's not going to lose faith. I think that Peterson likes to tell that story all the time because it makes the point about this is about your conscience, not about your belongings and things. You could lose everything and still have a clear conscience and have a meaningful life. If you gain everything and you don't have a clear conscience, you will not have a meaningful life. You'll be constantly in a state of absolute uh, deteriorating angst in relation to the unknown, which is going to create angst. You don't want debilitating angst because how can you make decisions with debilitating anxiety? And our relationship to truth has to do with that. And here's an example from a business context. You're an employee of an organization and you're telling the truth as you see it. You could be right about everything you're saying, but if the organization is not at that level of truth, like their truth meter is 70 and your truth meter is 100, then you're out. They're going to get rid of you. But this is the catch. So in the short term, you're like, oh my God, I lost everything. But no, you gained a higher level of yourself following your conscience. That this is the argument. I've thought about this a lot. Uh, the next company is gonna, if you're at 100, they're either at 100 or they're at 110. or 101 or 100.1 or whatever. Like they're a little bit higher because now they're accepting you because you started at truth, and life is about getting to the company with a million energy. And you're at a million, they're at a million point 0.00001. But if you do what you hate, you get stuck at 100 level of truth. Your company's at 70 and you bring it down to 70. Uh or 60 or 69.99999, so that you never so that you don't create any problems, and now you're stuck. Now 50 years goes by, you work for that company and you never got to your potential. You were stuck at 69 units of energy. You never got to a million units of energy. You were stuck at 69 because of the company. So I'll use an example of the country. If you take Abraham Lincoln and you put him leading, you put him as just whoever in North Korea, he just got killed on the first day. He wouldn't have been able to get president, and then eventually shot by John Wilkes Booth. It's like the system that you're in matters, and you know the cost of not being authentic is is way greater than the cost of losing everything in the process of being that. That's a spiritual argument. If I mean, because it has nothing to do with this life. People die for what they believe. And it isn't even about what the truth is. It's about the subjective interaction of truth. Because you could be wrong. That's the thing. It's like you put it, you believe in something, and this is, I think, where the humility piece comes in, and the self looking in the mirror piece comes in, because man, it really stinks to go to be wrong. I think that would be like really to be wrong and lose it all. Were you following your So that's a quite, we always want to think we're good and we have the enemy and the enemy's evil and we're good. But if the enemy, they think they're good and we're evil, and we think we're good and they're evil, then how do you actually know who's good and who's evil? To go beyond, it's Nietzsche said, the person of knowledge must be able to love his enemies and hate his friends. To go beyond good and evil, you have to really know yourself. And to know yourself, you have to know more than just yourself. You have to know the world. You have to know your enemy. You have to know, and to know, you can't know. There's a lot of paradox. Because to know is like, it's like, all right, it's done. But in every conversation, we're going in with, this is as far as I got. And I think Peterson talks a lot about this, how the value of the scientific method. The scientific method is rooted in a monotheistic context, because it's more about a process than it is about knowledge itself, or something. But so yeah, tell the truth was rule 5. Abandon faith. The abandoned ideology piece is an argument for faith. Ultimately, to believe. Yeah, this is tricky. Because it's not just what you say you believe, but what you do, to stake your life on how you actually live and show up. And it it's not just about professing a belief, but actually revealing it in one's actions, interactions, sacrifices. And somewhere along there is an it's like it's both. I mean, Peterson's not necessarily saying that. He's fixated on, do our actions reflect what we believe we believe? Do our interactions reflect that? And how congruent are we with, like Zoroaster? Good thoughts, good words, good deeds. Um, how congruent are our actions, our words, and our thoughts? And the 12 rules are, and the embodiment of them, of the 24 rules, the conceptualization of maps of meaning and the instantiation of that in our being, makes us some Ubermensch. That's about as far as I am with all of that. And I haven't talked about we who wrestle with God yet, actually, and that'll be on another podcast. So it brings us to rule 7. Work as hard as you possibly can on at least one thing and see what happens. So if I'm looking at this, at these rules from above, we're not like wake up out of the victim mm, circumstances, although there's truth to it. It's like life is suffering. So much is out of your control. However, you have an ability to respond to your environment relative to your education, your relationships, your friendships, your community. That's why here, you become who you hang out with the most. Like we hear these cliches, that's the value of them. Don't just get swept into the zeitgeist of our time. You have an opportunity to really make something of yourself and can get a lot of meaning from work and a lot of meaning from success. And it doesn't just have to be this short-term oriented ego driven thing. So aim up. Imagine who you could be and aim single mindedly at that. Do not hide unwanted things in the fog. You're going to want to work through those things. So when you have power, you can maintain it and you won't be just like Osiris. You'll be a better version of a benevolent king, or the wise king, not the autocratic tyrant, or the fairy godmother, not the evil queen. Notice that opportunity lurks where responsibility has been abdicated. That's a great place to put all your pain and suffering into the next project and the next thing. Have a new goal, and that'll create positive emotion versus negative emotion, which is inevitably going to happen. But it's being around the uh, people that are also aiming up and aiming up yourself and having something to do and all of that. Oh, and not doing what you hate. So telling the truth. Remember, we're building on rule 12. I did this backwards, beyond order. I did first. We're going to be doing 12 rules for life in the coming months after the McGilchrist interview. And so a lot of that, I've kind of skipped, right? There's all this building in stand-up shape, you have your shoulders back, uh treat yourself like something you're responsible for, make friends with people that want the best for you, compare yourself to who you were, not to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. And all do not let your children do things that make you dislike them. Put your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. Pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient, right? That's long term or short term. Tell the truth or at least don't lie. That's why I went through these. Tell the truth or at least don't lie relates to do not do what you hate. Because if you do not do what you hate, you're less susceptible to ideology, is the argument. So, what exactly is ideology? Everything is in a vacuum, and we're not pursuing truth. There is no discussion. There is no listening. And this whole thing could become in a vacuum if those that prescribe to the 24 rules don't go out in the world and have conversation, listen, tell the truth. I guess that's what Popper's paradox of tolerance is. Tolerance is tolerant to intolerance. It rises up, destroys tolerance in itself. Where's the line of demarcation? I don't know. Trying to figure that out. But we can do a lot of good. This is the point. We can do a lot of good with just ourself. It's in How to Plan Your Life. 10 people that tell the truth or can fix a culture, or one person that stops lying can bring the whole tyranny down. Are you Solzhenitsyn? Who are you really? Oh yeah, I'm definitely Solzhenitsyn. You're probably not Solzhenitsyn then. That's a scary thought. That's a lot of responsibility. How much truth can I handle? How much courage do I actually have? Or am I just a coward? So work as hard as you possibly can on at least one thing. And what that's supposed to do is build courage. It's not just, it's definitely not just getting the money or getting the accolades or getting the outcome. It's about who you become in the process. It's like a cliche. Why is it cliche? Maybe there's truth to it with a capital T. What are you working as hard as you possibly can on? Because by doing that, you will not be the same person. You'll be more long-term oriented, and that's the point. If there's this battle of hero and adversary in our own body, in our own mind, in our own hero's journey, there's also a hero and adversary beyond us in the social group, in the world. But we've got to, the more aligned we are with our own internal hero and adversary that are at odds, the better we could show up for the world, and the less likely we are to unintentionally, unwittingly disrupt the structure of culture so that chaos returns. Because you don't want to get to the end of the movie and realize you're the bad guy this whole time. That's got to be a terrible. You end up like Stalin choking on his own blood in his office. Everybody was afraid to go in there. The word I wrote down for Rule 7 was no. I think working as hard as you possibly can, at least one thing helps you say no. It's creating order. Where there's order, there's like a lot alignment of values. It's clear what we value, it's clear we don't. So when we leave the walled garden and we go into the unknown, we've got to leave. It's better to face the dragon with a wise king and a fairy godmother, um, than an evil queen and autocratic tyrant, or an evil queen. There probably isn't an evil queen or autocratic tyrant. They probably don't work together. I don't know that. Or evil queen running things, autocratic tyrant running things. The dragon's inside the castle in that case. It's chaos inside. It's all gray and dark, and the person in a position of authority, influence, and power there, they're living in the darkness. They're it's an upside down pyramid. They're at the bottom, but they're at the top. So is that what you want? Maybe that is what you want. But that's the argument, that you don't actually want what you think you want if that's what you think you want. And if let's say we are the good guys and we want a meaningful life and the most opportunity for others that are going to be in the future generations, we don't want an evil queen or a autocratic tyrant running things, because that there's always going to be future talent. There's always going to be future humans that aren't yet born that are better than us if we stick around long enough and we get more resources. It's like more resources, more reputation. We become Goliath, they're David. I guess it's like passing the baton. What's beautiful, or what's true with a capital T, what's good about the world is letting, it's like what's that movie, Star Wars, when, is it Obi-Wan? I don't remember. He lets Darth Vader kill him so that his mentee could see that. It's like he passed the baton to the mentee. At some point, you got to pass the baton to the mentee. And an open society wants that. Like, there's already people out there better at culture than me, whether they are recognized or not. I'm not even recognized yet. It'd be nice if I get that. And then, okay, you could take the reins. Maybe I won't even be able to compete. I'm not working as hard as I possibly can. I'm not sacrificing enough. I'm not even good enough. And now it's just competition. Well, that's driving me now. If I eventually become a top spot, to it's an act of faith, humility, gratitude, not resentment, to promote, to let the future culture person beat me, right? Or whatever competition you're in. It's like that's But what do conglomerates tend to do? What do monopolies tend to do? They just buy them and they want to keep them, and it can become corrupt even though they have the money and the power. And so, what do societies do? They try to stop monopolies. They try to stop these things because they end up just undermining innovation, undermining competition, undermining customers, and ultimately undermining shareholders. So there's this it's just a lot of paradox in how we burden these embedded contradictions of reality. Rule 9. I wrote down, oh, I rule 9. I didn't even say rule 8. This is this is clean your room was a big theme in 12 rules. It's like stand up straight with your shoulders back. Rule 1. Rule 6, put your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. Cleaning one's room was a big theme. It's like part of the popularity of this guy from Canada telling people to clean their room, to take responsibility. It was perfect timing with the pandemic. Like people were depressed, anxiety's high. Having a clinical psychologist advise everyone on fundamental tenets of fundamental tenets that help humans navigate anxiety and increase meaning. Capacity for meaning must have been, well, was super helpful. Huge tailwind. Had Dr. Peterson not worked for since the early 80s on this project, um, right? That book, Maps of Meaning, started in 84, came out in 99, if I'm correct, but definitely started thinking about it in the late 70s, early 80s, or maybe even before that. Had he not been working on all that, putting out videos, would it gotten such a tailwind in the pandemic? No way. I don't think so. I don't think so. There was all that content, all that available information. It was the right person at the right time, but all that work was done. It's now that all that work is done, and now there's like, oh my God, all this fame and infamy. I mean, it's not just people that agree, it's like people that hate you, right? You become a scapegoat for other people's sufferings, and some self-inflicted because no one's perfect, obviously. And then even people that love, right, as the content changes, becomes more cerebral, higher, more cerebral, more abstract. Those that were fans, they maybe they don't know even what is being said and why, now they resent the parent. I loved you. You changed my life, but you're different now. I don't like what you have to say. I don't agree with what you're saying now. What are you wrestling with? You know, I want the classic World of Warcraft, not this new stuff. The classic Jordan B. Peterson, not this new stuff. It's like, that's why, where am I going with this? Try and make one room in your home as beautiful as possible is about awe. It's not just cleaning your room, it's making it as beautiful as possible. It's saying, what now we're moving towards we who wrestle with God. We're moving towards the big questions, the metaphysical arguments that have been argued for thousands of years. It's like we need awe in our lives. So the least we could do is put our attention on awe by making at least one room in our home as beautiful as possible. It's like he took the metaphor and just went another level up. Don't just clean your room and have order. Make one room in your home as beautiful as possible so you have a sense of awe. It's about meaning, it's about discovery, it's about humility, it's about how am I going to be this archetypal hero and adversary in everyone's story simultaneously and burden this fame when I asked but didn't ask for it. Try and make one room in your home as beautiful as possible is about awe. It's about thinking about the bigger questions and deciding. It's about deciding. Try and make one. Oh, yeah. And of course, like the role of artists, art, um, I like also how it introduced, it's like introducing the what is maps of meaning really about? It's about how to navigate the unknown. There's what is, there's what could be, right? So we have known and unknown, and then what's known and what's unknown. It was an unknown unknowns and unknowable unknowns. There's the known, there's the unknown, there's the unknown unknown. Because the known and the unknown, we want to venture into the unknown. That's a very important part of our nature, he's arguing. That's it's deeply embedded in our brains, in our physiology, our it's part of our culture of human being. We have to engage with the unknown, take on voluntary suffering leads the meaning. Being the recipient of suffering just leads to anxiety and paranoias and ideologies and groupthink and the destruction of our civilizations, the destruction of ourself, the inability to procreate meaningfully and pass down our culture to the next generation. We've got to when we voluntarily go into the unknown, we go into it with a sense of awe, openness, humility. This is where the scientific method comes in. It's like a way to it helped evolve our species, uh, so we can face the unknown unknowns. We could discover the unknown unknowns because they're unknown unknowns. We don't even know we don't know them, but we come into contact with them from going into the unknown openly and willingly, and that's part of the necessary integration of of individuality and tribe and society to move into the unknown openly and curiously, in a discovering in a sense, a spirit of discovery brings us into the unknown unknowns. And but to do that, I guess we have to have a relationship with the unknowable unknowns, and our relationship with the unknowable unknowns impacts our psychology, our neurophysiology. That's a part of this whole argument because Dr. Peterson is arguing for like a theism, for he's arguing for the monotheistic. He's arguing for monotheism and the importance of monotheism in the Western society that has to navigate the technological advancements of a new era without losing the philosophy that came before it so that we can avoid death and destruction. And it's a big, because there's a fear of death and destruction. I think that's what's happening. It's very Nietzschean to me. It's like, but instead of creating our own values, Dr. Peterson is trying to help us rediscover values. Maybe that's what that quote is in Maps of Meaning in the beginning, like how Jesus said something about bringing the truths that have been lost. It's like Matthew 13:35 or something. Uncover truths. I gotta look it up. It was like truths that this I have not memorized. This truths that have been forgotten. I don't. Here it is. I had it because I was gonna try to internalize. So was fulfilled what was spoken through the prophet. Quote, I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter things hidden since the creation of the world. I will utter things hidden since the creation of the world. We have to uncover. It's like the physics of human being with a capital B. Yeah, yeah. Is that what it's like the physics of reality? Yeah, there's certain laws of physics. There's certain laws of human nature that if we follow, we will stay alive as a species. If we don't follow them, we're going to kill ourselves. Is it as simple as that? And it's like That's scary because without a God, we have this maybe we'll live forever. We have this never-ending expanse of the universe. We're just going to keep discovering, and we don't know why. We can do anything and everything at any time and suffer no consequences. But we don't want to do that because we actually will suffer consequences, but we don't know that we will, but history tells us we will. And these old stories are telling us that we're going to suffer some pretty terrible consequences if we forget that we have a like a physics to our nature. That's how I would describe what he's trying to argue. Uh, uh, and more, yeah. Now we're at rule 9. Man, this is way longer than I thought it would be, but I'm not gonna just end it. If old memories still upset you, write them down carefully and completely. I find it interesting that that comes after try and make one room in your home as beautiful as possible and before plan and work diligently to maintain the romance in your relationship because if old memories still upset you, write them down carefully and completely. Hey, if old memories still upset you, there's plenty reason why someone would not believe in God if they're living in hell. And it's like hell carrying around pain and suffering one didn't even invoke. Um, so writing down old memories carefully and completely helps us get out of the story that isn't ours, that is true. It's true in the sense that it occurred. It's true in the sense that if we're still acting it out, we're making it more real every day. But there are many stories, and there's archetypal stories that we can embody to pull us up, 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 upward out of hell to where we would believe in again, believe in something. And if we don't write down old memories carefully and completely, it will be hard to believe. And we have to believe and have faith to even have a relationship with this is plan and work diligently to maintain the romance in your relationship. So 9 is the new story, but 10 is not your story, it's our story. Because when we go into a marriage, a covenant under God, a partnership under God, it more than a conceptual belief. People don't know what they're even believing there. It's not just, oh, all of the knowledge, the content. It's the sacrifice, the total full immersion. We're not even a whole, we may not even be have the capacity in our nature to be a full person in the absence of a partner. That's a constant feedback loop of accountability for our personal contradictions as we navigate reality. When we look, it's like Heidegger, in a Heidegger sense. If we look, as soon as we put our attention here, everything else becomes dark. That's where the light is, where our attention is, and everything else becomes dark. But our partner, relative to how much truth we can handle, how much truth we share with one another, they make what was dark light, and it's an accountability mechanism. It's like a constructive feedback loop. And I've talked about this in other podcasts how more energy is filtering back to the individual relative to how they relate to their partner, how they relate to their spouse, the past and how well it's been worked through and what stories they're embodying impact how intimate, close, real that relationship, the relating, the relationship, you know, I'm a relation. I'm not, this is like Kierkegaard, I'm not the relation. I'm the wait, it's the self is not a relation, but the relation, The relating of the relation. Oh my God. That quote goes beyond me. I gotta look it up. I know where I'm going here though. Kierkegaard, like the whole thing is it's not just you, it's you as an individual, it's the us. It's our I has that relationship, its potential, its a value has a relationship with the relationship, with the relating of both parties, how they relate to one another. And that is influenced by how each of them address the past. If old memories still upset you, write them down completely, carefully and completely. That will influence that relationship, how each party relates to one another. And that is an underappreciated piece of information right there. Uh, Kierkegaard quote on relating. Ugh, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to find it. Here it is, actually. Wow, the internet's amazing. A well-known quote by Soren Kierkegaard that speaks to the concept of relation is, quote, the self is a relation which relates itself to its own self, or it is that in the relation that the relation relates itself to its own self. The self is not the relation, but that the relation relates itself to its own self. So it's not the relation, but the phenomenon that the relation relates itself to its own self. Good luck with that elaboration. Here we go. It's in the Sickness Unto Death. If you want to read that book, the self as a relation. Kierkegaard emphasizes that the self is not a static entity, but rather a process of relating to itself. Of course, I've thought about that in the shower. Of course. Self-consciousness. The self, this self relation is crucial for human consciousness as the self becomes aware of itself through this process. Let's go read this again. The self is a relation which relates itself to its own self. Like there's an interaction going on, or it is that in the relation that relates. But it's so it like if there's a self and there's a relation of itself to itself, there's like there's an it's A and B. In between it is C. God, I hope I'm making sense. The self is the C, not the A and the B. Let me make sure that works. The self is a relation which relates itself to its own self, or it is that in the relation that the relation relates itself to its own self. The self is not the relation, but that the relation relates itself to. Yeah, so it's not C. It's like D, which is like around the A, the B, and the C. The fact that the A, the B, and the C are happening because A relates itself to itself. There's a relation. The self is not the relation, but that the relation relates itself to itself. So if there's a circle around A, B, and C, the self is the D. I wonder if Peterson studied Kierkegaard. I got to ask him. Yeah, what does Kierkegaard mean by relation? We are the relation of those things in relation to that relation. We are the relation of those things in relation to that relation. In other words, yourself is that relation relating to itself, which posits the third relation, which is God, or the foundation of yourself. Wow. This should I need to read that book and make that a podcast. I've always loved Kierkegaard, felt drawn to him. Uh, Kierkegaard defines the self as the relations relating itself to itself in the relation. Yeah. The relations relating itself to itself in the relations. In the so many relations. The relations, the relations relating itself to itself in the relation. The self is the relation. as the relations relating itself to itself in the relation. Yeah, the phenomenon of the relating. It's not the relation itself, but it's that it occurs, or it's that actual interaction. Yeah. What if our self has a yeah, our self then has a relationship with how much energy is filtered through the relation, or the relation of relating. I was trying to explore that idea in 30 Days of Thought in one of the excerpts. It's like O plus M equals B or something, or I don't know where that book is. It was actually, it's over here. It was, this is interesting. It was here. It's not life, conscious thought, humanity. Do you want to be managed? Systems, concealed truth. Oh, here it is. Oh, it's on page 188. O plus or minus M equals B. Page 188 in 30 Days of Thought. O plus or minus M equals B. This is back from 2019. I was trying to work through this, and I think it has a relationship with this whole this thought here. But on another podcast, we'll talk about it. I'm going to give myself a headache trying to figure this out, but I'm glad at doing this live. The self is a relation which relates itself to its own self, or it is that in the relation that the relation relates itself to its own self. The self is not the relation, but that the relation relates itself to its own self. So there's an interactive quality to the self, and I think speaking to that, Peterson's 24 rules are an attempt to help us to help the relating, the relation of the relation. Oh man. And what does that have to do with planning and working diligently to maintain the romance in our relationship? The rituals that it takes to act out the stories that underpin marriage and sacrifice and service to our wife, husband, life partner, they impact this self that we're talking about here. That's part of what Dr. Peterson is arguing, that this relation of the relation, or the relating of the relation, has a relationship with that checklist. And part of that checklist from rule one, and how we become a master of our culture versus a cultural critic rooted in competence versus a cultural critic rooted in, is it just resentment, destructive, arrogant, deceit? That brings us to rule 11. Resentful, deceitful, and arrogant. Resentful, deceitful, and arrogant. Resentful, deceit. But Nietzsche really argued, I think, that is a big part of just our ontology, is the resentment, the deceit, and the arrogance. And Jordan is trying to climb out of that using the Gospels, faith, um, that whole Judeo-Christian structure, and empowering us towards not being the victim or the bully, but choosing love, courage, attention, and intention in Rule 12. Be grateful despite your suffering. Be grateful despite your suffering. Your marriage will have something to do with that. What's most interesting, though, are some of for the is it the value that marriage can have for the everyday person is unquantifiable and necessary for the stability of a culture that self-governs. A culture that self-governs where the average person it falls away from narcissistic qualities, Machiavellian, psychopathic qualities, is one where there are accountability mechanisms in a part of the self's a part of what in a part of the self, and that self is represented by our individual uh, progress through education, career, marriage, friendship, community, culture, society, and personal passions, and avoiding. So, rule 11, if we let ourselves become resentful, deceitful, and arrogant, we're going to be the victim or the bully. Regardless of where we fall in the socioeconomic hierarchy, the hierarchy of competence, uh, we could become, we'll be destined to become the autocratic tyrant or the evil queen. However, if we follow Rule 12 and we are grateful in spite of our suffering, we open up a possibility for love, courage. Our attention will not, we will not lose our attention. Because think about how a board is a constructive accountability. The board to the CEO is like the spouse to their partner. There's an accountability. Accountability is given in speech, taken in action. Responsibility is modeled in behavior and interaction, relationship. This goes back to that whole quote around the relating, what the self. And so Rule 10 impacts Rule 11 and Rule 12 because of the necessary, the more energy that's kept around the self through that relationship, the less resentful, deceitful, and arrogant, the more grateful, honest, and humble. If I have gratitude, if I tell the truth, even if I can lose everything. So the CEO that's making $70 million a year that made a big mistake, are they going to tell the board? They would if they were grateful, honest, and humble. They wouldn't if they were resentful, deceitful, and arrogant. And if they follow that, they're not only going to lose the money, they'll lose their soul. They lose in the future. They might win in the short term, they lose in the future. The CEO that says, I messed up, this one, and they lose their job. They go back to that employee that didn't do what they hated. They grew. That's the argument. They grew and they'll have another opportunity, or maybe they never will. Maybe they never will. They'll be like Job. Everything will go downhill for them forever, but they will have their conscience. It will be clear. And on their deathbed, they will say, it was worth it. Now, they might not do that if they don't believe conceptually in a higher power. So I guess maybe they would just say, fuck this. This sucks. I did it all the way I did everything right. And you've just scorned me and me. I guess you have to believe in your core. Now, the question becomes, will you believe in your core if you've done the right thing? You might be more likely to believe in your core if you've done the right thing because your conscience is clear. But if you haven't done the right thing, why would you believe in your core? Well, you wouldn't believe in your core because then you're going to be guilty and feel shame. But if you've done the right thing and your conscience is clear, wouldn't you believe and then you'll be less likely to be guilty and shame? So I guess the question becomes my ending statement for the Beyond Order: can we actually love and have courage without faith.